one of the things with loss is you lose the naivety that a positive pregnancy test definitely means you will have a baby in your arms in 9 months. You no longer have the luxury of imagining that that's true. These babies who are lost to miscarriage are also worthy of dignity. I really view the work that I do now is an extension of parenting these babies still.
Welcome to the Truth and Fertility Podcast. I'm Haley, wife, mom, and a fertility charting instructor, here to teach you the undeniable truth about your fertility. So let's get started. Welcome back to the Truth and Fertility Podcast. Today I am talking with Jocelyn Abyad. She is a co-founder of the ministry We Carry You Still, and today we're going to be chatting all about miscarriage. So Jocelyn and I are friends, and we kind of connected in the NFP space, and my husband also did a bathroom remodel for them. So we know Jocelyn and her husband from that too, and she is just a beautiful soul and has this beautiful ministry helping women through their miscarriages. And I know she has a story of her own to share as well. So we're just going to be talking about that today. So without further ado, Jocelyn, if you want to just introduce yourself and then maybe share a little bit about your story and what gives you passion for helping women in their miscarriage journeys.
So fun to be having this conversation officially. I think if you've seen someone's bathroom, then you're definitely good friends. So there we go.
Exactly, right? Tour on the walls and the tiles were good friends.
Right?
Good.
Yes, there we go. But yes, for those who I haven't met, my name is Jocelyn Abyad. I am the wife of Father Ziad Abyad. We are Melkite Catholic, so we're not Roman Catholic. And I am the mother to 7 girls on earth and 3 babies in heaven. I am an Arizona native, and so I feel very fortunate to live and serve here still among, really long time and beautiful friendships, and serve at our parish, St. John of the Desert, with my husband. And then in addition to volunteering at the parish, I maintain an online presence as Melkite Mama, and I share homeschool and liturgical living tips. Lots of people are curious about Eastern Catholicism, and so I kind of talk over there about that. I write for Busy Kids, which is a Byzantine Christian children's magazine. And extending from that work, I host the local Busy Kids and Busy Teens homeschool co-op here in Phoenix. And then to your point, my most recent endeavor was co-founding a nonprofit called We Carry You Still. And our ministry seeks to serve those who have experienced miscarriage or infant loss by providing practical resources for their immediate needs and supporting their long-term journey through grief into healing. So that's me in a nutshell.
Amazing. It was funny too. You mentioned the Melkite Mama, and I had no idea that you had that whole other space too until you emailed me and it came in as Melkite Mama. And I'm like, that's Jocelyn. So
Yes.
that's amazing too. I'll definitely put links in the show notes if you can send them to me so that people can check that out too, because I know that would probably be very intriguing to a lot of my listeners. Okay, so Jocelyn, if you could go into a little bit about your story and why you're passionate about helping women through their miscarriage journeys. I know that you introduced yourself saying you have 3 babies in heaven. So what gives you that passion?
Yeah. Well, about 5 years ago, my husband and I lost 3 babies to miscarriage. We lost Eden, our first, at 10 weeks, and then we lost another baby, Thomas, later that year at 6 weeks. And then the following year, we lost another baby, and we named him James, and we lost him at 15 weeks. And I think, as anyone can imagine, the world really changed for us when we buried our babies. Before that, we had 6 living children. And so I really just felt that miscarriage was something that happened to other people, maybe something that people who had infertility would struggle with. I just didn't think it was something for me. So I was really blindsided by these experiences. And I was really astonished at the lack of faithful resources that were available to me. I had a lot of practical questions as well, like how do I bury my baby? Can I bring a baby that's miscarried at home to the cemetery? Where do I buy a casket for them? How do I do this, like on a very practical level? And then further, how do I grieve this? How do I, address the situation spiritually? And it was really a dark night for my soul. I am a cradle Catholic. I have always been faithful, and I still believed in God, but I really wasn't sure he was good. And I was willing to obey or submit, but I didn't see how this could be love. And so I had these really deep questions that needed to be answered on a spiritual level, on a emotional level. After our third loss, I really started to suffer from panic attacks. I think I had anticipated the grief and the sadness, but I didn't anticipate the fearfulness that would really kind of overcome a lot of my thoughts. um, in a brief synopsis, I felt like I couldn't keep these babies safe, so then all of my babies, I couldn't keep them safe. And so this loss that was experienced in pregnancy just started growing to encapsulate all of my birth experience. I was a failure as a mother. That's what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to grieve babies, and a lot of my pride and my identity was in, like, I'm a um, great birthing mom. I have all these babies, this identity around this. So it was really this like emotional crisis. And then a spiritual one as well, because unfortunately the church hasn't been clear throughout history. It's very recent that the church has really addressed this experience at all. And there can be really widely varying experiences of what the church will answer or provide for couples who are experiencing this loss. Um, and so through our personal losses, my husband and I were both just really awakened to this need for resources, both practical, spiritual, and emotional, that women and couples have. And so did my work, did my own processing and healing, took the time that I needed to, went to therapy, sought out spiritual fathers, um, and was able to heal myself. And part of that process was serving others. I think a lot of people channel their grief or their hard experiences into, shaping that as a better experience for others. And there were two women who were really integral in my healing that worked for a Protestant ministry that served women experiencing miscarriage. And so I was volunteering with them. I brought my mom to one of the events. They were shorthanded. And I said, "Isn't this event beautiful? We need a Catholic version." And she said, "Well, I just retired. Let's do it." And
That's
um,
awesome. What a
right?
great response.
It really was. I will say that's, if we just fast forward past all of it, one of the really beautiful fruits has been this like beautiful time that I have with my mom in like both of our quote unquote older age. Like I'm not a child anymore. I have my own children, but I still get to spend this really special time with my mom, and we do this work together. And that's been really just beautiful in our relationship to have this time together. But yeah, really without her, the ministry would not exist. A lot of times she likes to just give me all the credit, and my voice is out there, my face is out there. It is my story. But with well, and now too, we have one more living child after our losses. So with 7 kids, we homeschool. My husband's the associate pastor at our parish, plus he has a secular job. We have a lot going on at our house. There's just no way I could have done this ministry without her. And then my two friends who joined, Lindsay and Tanya. So between the 4 of us, we brought this ministry to fruition. So that's really where my passion for the ministry comes from, was my own experiences of loss, and this awakening of how few faithful resources are out there, um, and how little acknowledgement there is for women and couples who experience miscarriage, and yet how common it is. I know a lot of people hear like 1 in 4 pregnancies end in miscarriage, but I think a more powerful statistic is that nearly 50% of women will experience a miscarriage or infant loss in their lifetime. So that's nearly half of us. Why aren't we talking about this? Why aren't there places that we can go when we're in need that will give us the resources that we need and the support that we need? And so I just want to be part of the change, a part of making this better. For those who are walking the same road we did.
Yeah. Oh man, how beautiful. I want to go back to one of the things you said at just the very beginning. You talked about you named the miscarried children. And I want
Yeah.
to talk about that because I think that in and of itself, like you and I can talk about it like, because we know that they are human lives. They are, no matter what week it was at, they are your children and they deserve names and they deserve a proper burial and they deserve honor and respect in our families. And so, but so many, that's not a, like, we're the minority in that. Like that's not
Yes.
a normal
Yeah.
thing that you hear of people doing. And especially like on the medical side of things, right? You'll hear something like, oh, well, it was just a chemical pregnancy. If it was any less than, what is it, 5, 6 weeks, they call it like a chemical pregnancy, or wasn't a
Yeah.
real pregnancy, or it's not commonly acknowledged that this was an actual loss of a child. And I think that in and of itself is something that needs to be sat with for a long, long time, because that's a reality of what just happened. And given the fact that you said 50% of women experience miscarriage. I mean, that's 50% of women that are losing a child, and it's a child that they've never met, but it's still a child. And coming to that realization. So I guess my question is more so, is that something that you've found um that you've, well, of course, I want to say found difficult. Of course, it's difficult to have that realization, but is that something that most women are able to kind of to recognize and to then name their child, or is that a hurdle in and of itself to even recognize, like, oh, I should name this child? Can you talk a little bit about that and your insight on
Yeah.
that?
Yeah. I think, you really hit on a key point of this grieving process. When a parent gets to have their child for such a little amount of time, there are very few things we get to do for them. And when we talk about what women typically experience in miscarriage versus what I would hope a woman would experience in miscarriage, this is what we're talking about. When we acknowledge that a child has been lost, the hopes and dreams for that child, perhaps for your marriage, for even like how close they would be to a sibling. There's so many things that are wrapped up in this loss around a human person, right? But as the parent, you get to name them and you get to bury them. So treat their body with dignity. And in some cases, that's possible, not in all. So I don't want to pile on guilt, but in many cases, it is possible. And women are robbed of that opportunity. And I see that that creates a lot of additional trauma unnecessarily. But when a woman or couple are given the opportunity to name their child, to bury their child if possible, and to provide them with a dignified death, right? We all pray for a good death for ourselves, but that's also for our children, right? And in this case, when we're losing our child very young, we can give them a good death. That is a something that we can pray for, and that is a reality that we can offer to our child. Death will come for us all. It's just come for our children sooner than we expected and sooner than we had hoped. But we can make that something that is good in the capital G sense. Not that it's not sad or unbelievably difficult, but instead of being trauma, it can be redemptive suffering. It can be an acknowledgement of this eternal soul and the pain that is the separation from that eternal soul right now. So, is naming their babies common? I don't think it is, but I think it's incredibly powerful in the healing process for people. One of the things that I've really come across in the ministry that has surprised me is how many older women, and I'm talking 60s, 70s, even 80-year-old women who have come to me and said, I was never able to acknowledge that I had another child. Um, And I even have a friend at my parish, and she shared with me that she had lost twins. And I said, "Oh, I'm so sorry. What did you name them? I would like to pray for them." And she said, "I never thought I could name them." And I said, "Absolutely, you can name them." And so that was just a really beautiful opportunity for her. And then not only by naming them do we acknowledge them, but then we can pray for them and we can invite others to pray for them as well. And so in our personal and in our church prayers, we can offer these prayers for our children by name. And I think that's incredibly powerful. Um, and so it's definitely something that we encourage as a ministry. I think it's something that is becoming more normalized, but it absolutely hasn't been in the past. And you're right, the medical community, certainly like the culture at large, does not encourage it. Um, kind of bridging over to something that's very common. My first loss, initially, I was just basically sent home to miscarry at home, which that's most typically what happens in a first trimester miscarriage. But my biggest question for my medical provider was then, so do I flush my baby down the toilet? I mean, this is really what women are left with. They're given no advice, um, and left to say, well, your baby died. And I mean, I was 10 weeks along. Women are, quite a ways pregnant. And they're just told to go home and flush their baby down the toilet. And they won't even maybe necessarily call it a baby. They probably wouldn't even
They
acknowledge it.
won't.
They
They
just
probably
kind of
won't.
say, just deal with the pregnancy, take the medicine, you'll experience heavy cramping, and that's like all you get, right?
Yeah.
And so that in itself is, again, very traumatic. So if we can name our baby, if we can treat their body with dignity, no matter how small, um, and again, I never want to shame anyone that didn't have the chance to bury their baby. I think many women are never given the information. And then our second loss was so early, I was never able to find a body. So that is a reality as well, right? So we have to kind of live in that balance. But I do think, even for myself, it's so healing to be able to go to where my babies are buried, to have a place to acknowledge their existence, right? Um, so yeah, that's a long answer to
No, that was so good.
naming your
And
babies.
if you don't mind, can I ask a few like practical questions about that? Because I
Yeah.
personally have not experienced a miscarriage. And so just for listeners that are like me and just curious, or listeners that have experienced a miscarriage and they've never been given this information, two practical questions. One of which is, how do you name your baby if you don't know, if you never found out the gender, the sex?
Mhm.
That was my
Mhm.
first question. And then second question would be logistics, or practicals of like, how do you bury your baby that you're miscarrying, if you're being told by the doctor, just flush the what they would probably call tissue and blood.
Yeah.
Right, so two questions there, if you can answer just more of the
Yeah.
practicals of that.
Yeah. The naming one is probably easier. It, in many cases, in a first trimester loss, we don't necessarily know the gender, um, objectively. And for my first and second loss, we did not have like the genetic testing or anything like that. And so we just prayed about it and came up with names that we felt called to. And I'm very comfortable with that. And on the flip side, there are people who that's very difficult for them, to, what they perceive as guessing. And so they'll pick a neutral name, um, something that, like, I don't know, Charlie, especially nowadays, can
Yeah,
be like a very sweet name, or
right.
Joe. Um, and so they'll pick, just a name that could be for either gender, and they're more comfortable with that. So I think sometimes we can, really worry about that, but I think either way is an acceptable way. But it's just so much easier. It's the same thing as like when you're pregnant, you're not pregnant with it. You're not, like there's a
Right,
baby,
right.
him or her, right? And so being able to integrate this child into your family, into your vocabulary, into your life, they need a name. It's just easier than being like or that baby we lost, and
Yeah.
just it brings familiarity. It allows this child to remain a part of your family, a part of, which is the reality, right? To acknowledge the reality that this child existed, that they're part of your family, that you'll meet them again someday. This is a total sidebar, but it's my passion. Like, people are like, oh, your angel in heaven. No, we do not have angels
Thank you.
in heaven. We have
Yes.
babies. And when we
Yes.
say, I look forward to the resurrection of the dead, that means your baby too. That is really such good news, that these are babies, that these are human children, right? But I digress.
We could go on that theological
I know, right?
conversation.
And that's part of why I really wanted our ministry to be, we serve both Catholic and Orthodox communities, because our language is different than Protestants, right? So Protestants have beautiful ministry, but their theology is different, and therefore their theological language is different. And so it's very important to me that when people are grieving, we can speak our language, our Catholic or Orthodox language, because both our traditions share this apostolic tradition. But on the practical side, to bury your baby, I think number one, I guess let me rewind a little bit. I think a lot of people imagine that miscarriages are typically very spontaneous. And in today's day and age, it's actually less common that you would just like immediately start bleeding and have very little time to make a choice. So typically what women experience now is they go in for a routine ultrasound. They may or may not have had spotting. Many women have no signs of the impending miscarriage at that point. They go in for the routine ultrasound and they find that the baby has no heartbeat. And then at that point, they have to make decisions about how they're going to manage the miscarriage, whether they're going to manage it medically. Either that would be either taking medication to help the baby pass more quickly, a D&C would be an option, or naturally just waiting. But it can take the body 3 to 4 weeks to recognize that the baby has passed before they will actually pass the baby. So I think a lot of people, number one, don't know that you actually typically have time to make decisions, which I do think is a gift. If the miscarriage is spontaneous, that's much more difficult. You're in this immediate traumatic situation, you have no time. If you have a no heartbeat diagnosis, you get to choose what the next couple of days or weeks are going to look like, and you can make arrangements for your child. So in the case for myself, when we lost our baby at 10 weeks, and this is an important point I want to make, especially for Catholics. Sometimes people are rushed into taking the medication to help the baby pass. And I think it's really important to make sure that the baby has actually passed. A lot of times people are getting early ultrasounds where perhaps the heartbeat wasn't detected, and that could still be a viable pregnancy. So I really want to encourage people to be sure and maybe even get a second ultrasound or wait the week before you do anything to actively end or pass the baby. Does that make sense?
Yes. And if I can interject really quick, when
Please.
my parents were pregnant, when my mom was pregnant with me, they had an ultrasound at like, I don't know, 7 weeks or so, and there was no heartbeat. And my mom had already had, she had had a miscarriage before me. And so, but they said, let's take a week, come back in a week, and we'll check the heartbeat again, and we'll do an ultrasound again and see if we can find a heartbeat. And so in a week, well, and I'm here today, so so you know the end of the story.
Yeah.
The week later,
Right.
they found a heartbeat. They found my
Yeah.
heartbeat. And so yes, I totally second you in that you should absolutely, especially if it's earlier in the pregnancy, wait a week, or wait 2 or however many your doctor offers, to just
Right.
confirm. Yeah. I want to interrupt this episode to tell you about We Heart Nutrition. This is a company that is family owned and offers wholesome, research backed supplements for both men and women. Their products are crafted with integrity using clinical doses of research backed, most absorbable forms of each nutrient. And what I love most about this company, you guys, is that it is pro life. 10% of every sale they give to the pro life cause and supporting pregnancy care centers. So it's amazing. This is definitely a place that I want to support. So I have been taking the prenatal vitamins and their magnesium supplements. And first of all, I feel like I'm just in a season of life where I'm just always taking a prenatal, whether I'm pregnant or nursing or preparing for a pregnancy. I really love that I am taking a prenatal that I can trust, and also the magnesium helping with good sleep, especially when I have those babies waking me up during the middle of the night. So go to weheartnutrition.com and use the code TRUTH to get 20% off of your first order. That's code TRUTH for 20% off your first order. I know you're going to love them.
With my 10-week loss, we had gone in at 9 weeks. The doctor told me, I see a heartbeat. This is my other tip. Get those ultrasound pictures. I really treasure that one picture I have of her when she was
Yeah.
alive. And it just shows her little heartbeat at the bottom. And that's the only picture I have of her alive. And it brings me a lot of joy. So capture those ultrasounds if you can get them, even the early ones. But the doctor told me she looks too small, her heartbeat's slow. I'm pretty worried about her. And so come back next week. It was Holy Week. It was COVID. Can I just tell you, it was
Oh
really
gosh.
traumatic. The whole thing was
Yeah.
terrible. But
Yeah.
going back by myself, I mean, man, there's a lot of added stuff on there, but we won't go there.
Mm,
But when I went back the following week, she had passed away. There was no heartbeat. It was
mm,
clear, I was further along. And so I took I chose to take the medication and I delivered her at home. I went to a ministry called Heaven's Gain to buy her casket, and they have a miscarriage kit, which is really, really a beautiful resource. And it shows you what to look for. What is a clot versus what is your baby? What might you
mm,
see? They teach you how to put a hat and a strainer into the toilet so that you don't accidentally flush the baby with blood and clots and things like that. So I really was able to find this very practical information because I had the time between the no heartbeat ultrasound and when I took the medicine and when I was able to manage that. So, so you do want to know what you're looking for. You want to find those resources. And I think a lot of people are afraid that they'll be like grossed out or that they'll be afraid. But I just want to encourage people. It was honestly very peaceful. She looked like a little 10-week-old baby that you see in the pictures, in
mm.
the developmental books. And we blessed her body with holy water, and we're able to preserve her. And then at least here in Phoenix, and I will say, it depends on where you live. In each state the laws are different. Here in Phoenix, Catholic Cemeteries has a beautiful program, and you can bring your baby buried from home to the cemetery, and they will bury your baby for free under 20 weeks. So,
Amazing.
but at that time, I didn't know that. Like, I had to call the cemetery and ask, like, what do I do? Do you have to check? Like, no, they don't open your casket. Um, they will take your word for it. If you're not sure what you've collected, by all means, collect what you can, and they will bury it for you. Like, better safe than sorry on that end of things. So that's kind of like a first trimester. Does that kind of give you a snapshot?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, it does.
of the practical end. After 12 weeks, when you're into the second trimester, it's typically advised that you would have your miscarriage in the hospital. So we have different terms. So up to 20 weeks is considered miscarriage. After 20 weeks is stillbirth or infant loss.
Okay.
So you kind of have different categories here. But between 12 and 20 weeks, it's still a miscarriage. They do advise you to deliver the baby in the hospital. Women typically choose whether they want to have a DNC or whether they want to be induced and actually labor and deliver the baby. And so for my third loss, I was 15 weeks along. was definitely a boy. And we did choose to be induced and deliver him in the hospital. That was an incredibly difficult experience, but again, um, when you talk about those few things that you get to do for these babies who live a short time, I really felt like it was like healing for me and a part of my mothering work to deliver him, to do this for him. And for me, that was medically uneventful, which was a blessing. When he was born, he was beautiful. He looked like his dad. He had 10 fingers and 10 toes that we could count. We could hold him. Um, and and that was really special to be able to have that time and to do that work for him. Again, on the practical side, what was really difficult for me is the hospital did not want me to be able to take his remains home. Um, and I was very afraid to leave him there and have him be thrown away as medical waste. But I researched and found out in Arizona, and save everyone else time, and at least those who are in Arizona, you do have the right to bring your baby home and then have them buried. And so that's the same thing that we were able to do with James. We, again, there's so many little things I could add, but we placed him in a saline bath. So babies aren't meant to be in air that are that little. And so their skin is very fragile. But when you put them back in water, you can really see their true beauty. And so we were able to bring him home in a little container. And then we were able to bury him at the cemetery. But like I had to jump through a lot of hoops at the hospital. They made me meet with a social worker to make sure I was mentally sound. I was like, I've never been more clear in my life. You cannot have my
Yeah.
son.
Yeah.
I will take care of him. I will bury him. But so I did have to jump through hoops, but it's absolutely, you're right. And I feel, especially as a Catholic, your responsibility to provide the burial. If you have a DNC, you do need to be really explicit with your medical provider that you want the remains back. It will not be something that you want to look at. It will not be an intact baby. So people need to be aware of that. But that doesn't deny their dignity. And you can work with the hospital and your medical provider for them to provide a container that hopefully will be less traumatic for you. And then again, you can escort your baby to the cemetery and have their remains be buried in that way. So that's kind of an early hospital loss. I helped my friend this year whose baby passed away at 23 weeks. After 20 weeks, you do have to involve a mortuary. So at that point, after the baby is born, they would be handed off to the mortuary, and then the mortuary would bring the baby to the cemetery. So 20 weeks is that legal limit here in Arizona, but again, it is different depending on what state that you live in. And again, after 20 weeks, it's typically a birth that we all would talk about as far as like contractions and delivering the baby and everything like that. So on the very practical end, that is how one would take care, that corporal work of mercy of burying the dead. So respecting that unique individual's body, whether you're at home or in the hospital, is definitely possible if you're given the information and the opportunity to do that.
Yeah. Wow. So one thing that was, so I worked at an OBGYN clinic for a little while as like an on-site NFP Creighton instructor. And one thing that I was so just amazed by with what this clinic did is it was a pro-life clinic. And so they very much respected and wanted to give dignity to those babies that are lost to miscarriage. And it served a lot of women that are not Catholic, not Christian, and not aware of the extent that you can go to honoring your baby that you lost in miscarriage or stillborn. And so we actually had a service at the clinic where we would offer burial. So rather than the couple going to taking the time to go to the burial site, which I do think would definitely be a huge part of the grief process. Like me personally, if that ever happens, I would want to be the one to bring my baby to that
Yeah.
burial site. But if the couple for whatever reason didn't want to, or for whatever reason that was, there was somebody at the OBGYN clinic that did that as a service, and they took the babies lost to miscarriage. So it's really, I think it's a beautiful service that we can do, especially for couples that don't want to go to that extent, or maybe the trauma was so much that they're not in a place to be able to do something
Exactly.
like that yet,
Exactly.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
so I wanted to ask you to, oh, sorry, did you have something to add?
No, no, what I was going to say is what you're bringing to light is that this is truly a pro-life issue, right? I
Yeah,
think
yeah,
that we do a great job of acknowledging, abortion and euthanasia as, being against life. But at the same time, we have these couples, and if we say that we are pro-life, that means lost to miscarriage are also worthy of dignity. And you're right, there are couples who are just in a place that is so grievous, they're not able to do that themselves. And so then again, we as a culture, we as a society, we as a church need to step up and do this corporal work of mercy. And I think those couples will find solace, if not in the moment, years later, to know that their child was buried with dignity as opposed to being thrown away.
yeah, absolutely. And there's another thing I'm thinking of too is when I was working at that clinic, that was something that was actually it was a ministry that the clinic had, but not only for the sake of honoring the babies that were lost, but it was also giving the couple the reality that yes, this was your child,
Yeah,
because of the fact that in mainstream medicine we don't hear that, right? We
yeah,
hear flesh, we hear this pile of cells or tissue or whatever. We
right.
don't, it's not normal that our lost babies are given that dignity. And so even just getting it in somebody's brain that you have an opportunity to bury your lost child, that in and of itself can give, it can write in your the reality in your brain for you of what just happened, which I think is an act of mercy, not to keep them in the dark of what just happened, but to give them the reality of you just lost a baby, and let's honor your baby, let's honor your grief, rather than downplaying what just actually happened, but giving honor to your lost child now, and helping that be a part of your grief. And I remember there was a couple at the clinic that they had also come in with a lot of traumatic experience already revolving miscarriage and loss, and we offered everyone the ability to bury their baby. And there was one specific couple I'm thinking of that chose not to. They denied it. And I think for them it was because they were never given that opportunity to before to recognize that this was an actual loss. And I think that there
Hmm.
was a numbness that came from their past experience of having multiple miscarriages and just being told flush it, or just being told it's a chemical pregnancy, or not being told that this is a child, and understanding like the true heaviness of this reality of what just happened. And so they denied it. And I think it was really just out of a self-protection of I can't face that. And some people are there. And so what would you say to the people that are there? Maybe somebody is listening right now and is in that scenario where they've never been given the permission to see this reality. And it's hard to actually recognize that, oh my word, that was my child. Like, what would you say to a woman or to a couple that's listening to this right now that is in more of that stage or state of mind?
Yeah. I think it is true. It is a self-preservation, right? But you also talked about too, people say, well, can I name my baby? Can I bury my baby? Is a very real question as well, because we're told not to, or we're told not to worry about it, or we're told they were too small to worry about it. So, we receive all this programming for so long. I don't know if you can give a universal answer to that, because I think it would really depend on where that couple was at in their journey with their faith and in their relationship with God already, of and even their own like emotional experiences of that, would really dictate how you could approach that. But I think just giving them permission is the number one thing that we can do, because we really can't step into what they accept or don't accept, or are ready to accept or are not ready to accept. But we can offer them options. And what women and couples most regret is the options they were not given. And so by simply empowering them to say, I'm so sorry for your loss. I know that this is incredibly difficult. I just want to let you know that we do have this option available that many people have found healing. Can I give you some more information about that? And I think that's really as far as you can go, if you don't know them. Then once you know someone, then you can start offering, some more context, some more information. But I don't know if I can give a universal answer other than no one will regret a choice they were offered. They may regret a choice they didn't take, and they will definitely regret a choice they weren't given.
Mm, yeah, yeah. And so even just giving them the option and giving them the empowerment to make that decision is already a mercy, and
Exactly.
allowing them to make that decision when they're ready. And yeah, yeah. What did, as much as you're willing to go into, what did your grief look like after your miscarriages? And did it look different with each miscarriage? And how what were the main things that you did to grieve that properly? And to, I know you talked at the very beginning about how you were wrestling with this idea of, is God even good because I'm going through this trauma? Um, if as much as you're willing to expand on that, what did that look like for you?
Yeah. Grief is messy.
Yeah.
I do
Yeah.
think each loss was different, and like the compounding of losses really was different for me. With our first loss, again, honestly, my primary reaction was like shock. Um, I just really couldn't believe, that this was happening to me. Um, and I just remember being really deeply, deeply sad, like laying in my bed in the darkness, like it's dark outside, it's dark in my heart, like, and really for the first time longing for heaven in a way that I never had before. And I always felt touchy, and even to this day, I feel touchy sharing it. It's not that I was suicidal. It wasn't like I wanted to actively do something, but man, I was ready to be in heaven with my baby. Like, so that loss definitely was the grief was experienced as sadness, and I was very anxious to get pregnant again at that point, to make sure that this was just a fluke, because a lot of times with your first loss, that's all you hear. Oh well, it's a fluke. Oh, there's probably something wrong with the baby. Let me just tell you how terrible a thing that is to say. Please don't say that to people. um,
No
uh,
kidding.
that is
Point
not a
taken.
helpful statement, just so you all know. It does not make anyone feel better. um, but I was really anxious to be pregnant again and to just like put that behind us. That was the fluke, whatever. And then we did get pregnant again fairly quickly. And then I was very anxious for this baby to be our rainbow baby. Like, I made rainbow cookies and I told my family right away, I'm going to be confident, I'm 5 weeks along, but I'm just going to speak positivity into this pregnancy. I don't know. But uh, almost as immediately after we announced, I started bleeding. And so in that way, it was kind of fleeting. Like I didn't have a baby to bury that time. Um, and but what started to creep in was a doubt. I started to have thoughts of like, I don't know how to explain it better than like as if I was a neglectful mother, that somehow I hadn't taken good enough care of these babies and then they died, or that I was getting too old, like I don't know, I would have been like 40 at the time. Um, so that, maybe I was just too old for pregnancy anymore. And so that was when more of like the doubt started to creep in about myself, about my identity as a mother, about who I was and whether or not I could take care of my children and things like that. Definitely was more hesitant about the idea of getting pregnant again, but again, still really wanting to confirm, like, we could do this, like, we could have a baby. And so by the third time I was pregnant, um, then one of the things with loss is you lose the naivety that a positive pregnancy test definitely means you will have a baby in your arms in 9 months. You no longer have the luxury of imagining that that's true. And so by the time we were pregnant with James, I was happy, but I was very fearful and just kind of like bracing myself, not wanting to be very attached. But he did really well. Like, we had these positive ultrasounds, we did the genetic test, everything came back positive, all of my numbers looked good. Then it was a boy, and for those who don't know me, all of my living children are girls. And so, of course, after having 6 girls, it was a big deal that we were having a boy. Um, and so but then, and this is interesting, but I was about 14 weeks along, and a girlfriend of mine was this same week pregnant as me, and she was like, "Oh yeah, I'm feeling the baby move," and all of a sudden I was like, "Oh my gosh, I haven't felt this baby move." And so for like a week, I'm like really paying attention and trying to like see if I can feel him move, anything like that. And so by the time I went to my old OBGYN, um, my blood pressure was through the roof. And that is the one and only time in my entire life that I've had high blood pressure, because I was just so anxious. And unfortunately, my worries were correct. They went in and did the ultrasound, and he had passed away. And so at that point was when things really got hard and dark for me. I was really devastated. I was really sad, but then, kind of like I mentioned before, it spread into this anxiety. And I don't know that you would have like seen that if you knew me during that time. I have pictures. We went on homeschool field trips. We like did things, but like I would, during this phase, I would dress my kids all in matching clothes, which people thought I was being really cute. But the truth is, I could count them easier that way when we were in public. So they would be like, okay, everybody's in pink shirts today. Count the pink shirts. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Like, I would count the kids and I would match them because I was just so worried about them. And then it kind of got to a point like where I couldn't take them to parks if I couldn't control all the exits, like it just started getting bigger and bigger. And so at that point was when I sought out therapy. I specifically did ART, which is like EMDR with Witness to Love here in town.
Yeah.
And that was really impactful for me. For me, I feel like that really made the difference. Um, and time, like, I know that nobody wants to hear that, but that's the truth, is that just living with the grief, you know, doing the things, getting past the first anniversary, getting past their due date, getting past these markers, um, it starts to lift. And then, I really view the work that I do now is an extension of parenting these babies still, right? So I found ways to incorporate them in our lives that were meaningful, and really found the truth of like this reality of the cross, right? That Christ has always put before us suffering and redemption. It is The crucifix has been in front of me my whole life. And yet when I had the crucifix, I said, why me? Why is this you, God? And yet he showed me who he was from the beginning, right? And so I had to wrestle with that. I had to, come to grips with that reality too. Um, so, I mean, that's a snapshot of,
Yeah.
what it looked like for me. I think pieces of that are common, experiences for women who experience loss, a lot of doubt, um, and a lot of times that grief turns into fear, which I don't think I would have foreseen that, but it turns out that is actually a pretty common response.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing all of that, because I think, even just knowing that you're not alone in something is is solace in and of itself, and recognizing like, okay, it is legitimate, the feelings that I'm having about this, and the sorrow and the grief and the darkness and the fear and anxiety and high blood pressure and everything that does to our bodies and our minds, and seeking therapy. I mean, yeah, and really just taking care of yourself is so important so that you can be the mother that you were called to be, and for your living children here on earth, and continuing to serve your heavenly children too. And so I'm sure that your ministry now is also part of that grief process, and continue.
Yeah.
And you said earlier, service to others that are experiencing the same thing, that is not only helping others, but it can also help yourself in your own grief. And so why don't you talk to us a little bit about that, and We Carry You Still, in your ministry, and how you and your mom found it. Well, you did talk about a little bit about you and how you and your mom founded it, but what do you guys do? What does this ministry do, and how do you help women that are going through this, and couples?
Yeah. Yeah. As you were saying that, I want to like go backwards for one
Yes.
more thing,
Yeah,
and then I
yeah,
will go into
absolutely.
it. But I think they kind of actually do answer it. Is that, and I know I briefly mentioned I did go on to have one more living child.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, and there's a lot of talk in the lost community about rainbow babies, and I think just in general, people want to talk about rainbow babies. Um, and Unfortunately for me, I really bought into the idea that her name is Thea, that Thea would make everything better. And so when she was born, I have newborn photos that are all rainbow themed, and we had bought rainbow sheets, like I was all in that this rainbow baby was going to make it all better. And then she was born and she was not Eden or Thomas or James. And so there was like a whole nother grief that had to happen to realize that while she is so beautiful and joyful and like this wonderful sweet child that is such a gift, she wasn't any of the babies that I lost, and she didn't make that better. And so I do think that's an important like thing to mention, in the context of like, what does healing look like? My ministry is definitely what healing looks like for me, as opposed to having another child. And so I think it's really important that we always point people to Christ. Like Christ, serving him, he is the answer. No person, not even a rainbow baby, can make this better. But Christ can. And so it, coming back to what you actually asked me
Yeah.
about is the ministry. That has been my healing, is serving other women who are walking this road. It's so powerful to be able to say me too, right? To say my baby died too, and I know um, what that grief is like, and let me walk with you. And that's really the motto behind We Carry You Still, is not just that we carry you still as in we carry our babies in our hearts forever, because we do, but we carry you still as in I'm going to walk by your side for as long as it takes, that we're going to carry each other. um, like the story in scripture where the paralytic, his four friends carry him to Christ. That is our model, right? He wanted to be healed, but he was not capable in that moment. When you're in grief, you're laying on your mat, you can't move. But Christ is there, and he has the healing that we need. And so we're the friends, we're going to carry you over to Christ. We're going to rip open the roof, we're going to lower you down, and we're going to let him do his work, right? We don't do the healing, but we will carry you. So what our mission is really threefold, and to answer kind of all those problems that I had. So we provide on our website referrals to resources for your immediate needs, both medical, spiritual, and practical, all in one place, all faithful to church teaching. We try to bring support to the entire relationship and community around the mother. So it's not just for the woman herself, but for her spouse, for her parents, for her friends, for those who love her and want to come around her. We have guides, ideas, as well as the practical advice for the medical, where to buy a casket, how do you get this done kind of information. So instead of scouring the internet, you can go to one place, find the information that you need, get your resources, get through that initial moment. And then the second layer that we offer as a ministry is our memory boxes. They are given free of charge. really, really beautiful. Really speak to the apostolic heart. They include holy water and an ornament that we have made locally for us, a gorgeous prayer reflection book. And the boxes can be requested by the woman experiencing a loss on our website, but anyone can actually request a box to give to a friend. So if it's the woman herself who's experienced a loss, one of our volunteers will hand deliver the box to her. If it's a friend, then we'll get the box to the friend, and then the friend has something to give, right? So many of us want to do something for our friend who is grieving, and we don't know what to do. So the boxes not only can provide the immediate comfort to the mom who's grieving, but they also give all of us in the community something to do for those who are grieving. So we offer those free of charge. They're beautiful. I hope that anyone who's listening will check it out. They are only local right now. We don't ship them, but we have volunteers from Queen Creek to Tonopah. I mean, north, I don't know,
You got a lot of
Anthem
Arizona covered.
to Chandler, Ahwatukee. I mean, so we've got a big area that we can do that. And certainly someone could request a box and then ship it to a friend. We just don't offer shipping right now. And then our third layer is, education and healing. So we provide education to the community. We did training for the Diocese of Phoenix NFP office this last month to provide awareness around this topic, to change the conversation. We go to memorial events with our table of resources, things like that. We'll support anybody's memorial that they're doing for Pregnancy and Infant Loss Awareness Month, things like that. And then we also host retreats. So we have a healing retreat. We just did our first one last month. It was amazing. We had just shy of 50 people there,
Wow.
and spent the day, just reflecting on this experience and what that looks like through the lens of our faith. And then we ended the day with a memorial where we got to pray for each baby by name. When people make donations to our ministry as well, they can dedicate their donation in their baby's name. So every single one of those babies that has ever been, entrusted, their name entrusted to our ministry, we prayed for them by name. So just really serving the community in that third layer. So that's what our ministry does.
That is
Yeah.
so beautiful. And I have to say, for those listening, I was able to see at the NFP training, NFP instructor training that you did for us, I got to see the boxes. They are beautiful. Like, beautiful is an understatement. Like, they are so well done. I was so just impressed with that. And they're free. Like, if you live in Arizona, this resource and this ministry is it's such a gift. So thank you so much to you and your retired mother for putting so much effort into this, because it's really amazing. Yeah. And I keep going back to that statistic you shared, that about 50% of women are experiencing at least one miscarriage in their life. And so this isn't something that's, I mean, it's niche, but it's like, it's for everyone. Like, it's at least for 50% of people. And so, and also too, like, as friends, you don't often know what to say to someone that even the ones closest to you that you love, you don't often know what to say. And so you can say stupid things like, well, maybe there was something wrong with the baby, right? Like, you say dumb things like that because you just don't know what to say. Rather than saying anything, you should go to We Carry You Still and get a box, deliver a box, say nothing, but cry together and give her a hug. And I'm assuming that that's probably the best, the best thing you can do.
Yes. I mean, I wholeheartedly endorse that response.
Awesome. Oh my gosh. Well, Jocelyn, thank you so much for being on the podcast and for sharing your story. And just, I'm sure so many listeners are hearing this and just feel seen, and they feel seen in their grief, and at least have some sort of tool or step forward to continue in their healing journey of that. So thank you so much for everything that you do.
Absolutely. It's all the glory to God.
Amen.
Thanks for listening to the Truth and Fertility podcast. If you are enjoying this content, please leave a 5-star review. That helps me tremendously. For more information about learning to chart your fertility cycle, you can visit truthandfertility.com, and I'll talk to you guys again next week.